everybody, this is Courtney with Fiber Fox Studios, and we are going to be working on another mosaic as shown in the pictures today. And I am going to show you guys, this is my color B in this case, and this is going to be my color A that I'm going to be working with as well. You can use as many colors as you would like for this, and you can use size 3 or size 4 yarn. Because I'm using size 4 worsted weight or medium weight yarn, I'm using the 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a slip knot, and I like to do my slip knots by taking my working yarn and my tail right here and wrapping them around these two fingers, and then I bring that working yarn that I have pinched over here between my thumb and index over in between these two fingers, and then I pinch and pull back. That's how I create my slip knot. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my slip knot on my hook. You're going to be chaining for all of these mosaics in this crochet along. You're going to chain in multiples of 10 plus 6 at the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started by doing our first chain. So to chain, you just wrap your yarn around your hook and draw it up through that loop. That's 2 chains for me. Wrap and pull through. 3, 4, 5, and so on until you reach the desired number and size for your project. Just make sure that you have chained in multiples of 10 and then add 6 at the end. We're going to go ahead and pause here, and you can create the size of chain that you want for your project, and then we'll come back and do row 1. All right, so we're back, and I have a chain of 26. So I did 2 multiples of 10, then plus my 6 at the end. So now here we are at the end of our row here. We're going to go ahead and work into the second stitch. So you're going to be skipping this very first stitch in the hook, the stitch that's on your hook, the loop, it does never count as a stitch. So we are ignoring this that's on our hook. We're going to skip this very next one and go right here into the second. And we're going to make sure, since this is the first stitch in the row, that we go under both loops. So you want to make absolutely sure that you get under that V. So if you take a look here, you can see I've got both loops. I went into both. So I'm right under there, and I'm going to grab my yarn and I'm going to draw up a loop, and I'm going to grab my yarn again, and I'm going to pull through those 2 loops doing the first single crochet in the row. You're always going to do a traditional single crochet in your very first stitch and your very last stitch on all of the mosaics. That helps you keep nice, even, straight edges. Now from here, this is an extremely simple row. We're just going to move immediately over here into the very next stitch, and we're going to pick up the back loop only. And we're going to do a back loop only single crochet. So we're going to go ahead and draw up our loop and grab our yarn and pull through both loops on our hook. And that's our first back loop only single crochet. Now we're going to continue doing that exact same back loop only single crochet all the way down the rest of the row until we get to that last stitch. And the very last stitch will be meeting back up, and I'll show you guys how we're going to do our traditional single crochet. So you're going to continue on down your row doing a back loop only single crochet. So I'm pulling and picking up just that back loop, only one loop there on the hook, and I'm going to do that all the way down the rest of the stitches on my row. So you can go ahead and pause here, and we'll meet back up in a moment when we reach the end, and we'll do that last stitch together. All right, so we're meeting back up here at the end of our row. We have one last stitch to work into, and this is stitch number 25 for me. So we started off with a chain 26, and then because we worked in that second stitch, I now have 25 stitches. So again, down here, I'm going under both loops in this very last stitch. So making sure that I go under both loops, and now I'm going to do a traditional single crochet. So I'm just going to pull up my loop, grab my yarn, and pull through 2. And that is how we're going to be ending each and every row, always with a traditional single crochet. No matter what our pattern is telling us to do, first and last stitch is always a traditional single crochet. So now from here, I'm going to be chaining up to 1 and 2, and I'm going to have to clip my yarn. And so will you, because at the end of these rows, you're going to be clipping yarn. That's just how mosaic works. So I do the chain up 2 because I like to go ahead and pull through or pull up that loop on through, and then I like to grab and cinch down so that I never have my work come undone. So now we're going to be going back here to the beginning of the row again. And just like we did before, we're going to be inserting underneath both of those loops in the very first stitch. And we're going to do another traditional single crochet. I'm still going to be working in my color B, and that will be the same for you. You want to stay with your color B. Go ahead and do your slip knot and go ahead and add that onto your hook. And now we're going to go ahead and draw up that loop. So we're going to go ahead and draw up that loop. And then I like to grab my tail and working yarn and go ahead and chain one. You'll do this each and every time when you begin the row. And now we're going to go back down to that same exact stitch under both loops, and we're going to grab our working yarn and pull up a loop. We're going to grab again and pull through all those loops that we have on our hook to do our traditional single crochet in that very first stitch. Now from here, just like the last row, we're going to be doing our back loop only single crochet. So you're going to lift up that back loop in the very next stitch and do a back loop only single crochet all the way down this row as well. And we'll be meeting back up at the end so we can do that last stitch together. And then we'll be moving on, finally working on our color A and changing color for the next row. So go ahead and pause here and meet back up with me when you get to the end of your row. Doing that back loop only single crochet. Just as a reminder, back loop only single crochet. All right, so you've reached the end of your row. And you have this one last stitch left to work into. So we're going to make sure that we go under both of those loops so that we are working a traditional single crochet under both loops. We're going to go ahead and grab our yarn, pull up a loop, grab and pull through two to finish off our row with a traditional single crochet. And I am pulling a little bit on the tight side. You don't want to pull so tightly that you're gapping it. And now I'm going to go ahead and chain up two for me. I'm going to clip my yarn, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull my stitch on up and tighten, cinch that down to tighten it. So now we're going to be switching color finally. So I'm going to be moving on to my color A. I'm going to go ahead and get into this very first stitch. You can always find that first stitch in your row because it's the very first V when you look at your work from this angle. So we're going to go ahead and get underneath both of those loops just like so. And now we're going to be adding on our color A for the very first time. So this is now our third row that we've completed, or this will be our row 3, and we're going to go ahead and join on with our single crochet just like we have been. So I'm going to go ahead and pull through both of those loops. And just like I did before, I'm going to grab my tail and working yarn, chain one. Then I like to let my tail fall. And then I'm going to go right back into that same exact very first stitch. So I'm back in that same stitch. And I'm going to complete my single crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and pull through all those little loops. Now from here, our next move is going to be one back loop single crochet. And we're going to do that in this very next stitch right here. And then we're going to do one drop down double crochet in the very next stitch. So here's my next stitch. And to identify how I'm going to do the drop down double crochet, or where I'm going to place it, I'm going to go ahead and wrap my yarn around my hook just like I would do for a normal double crochet. Now I'm going to identify this is my very next stitch. And when I slide my hook down, there's this little ridge right here. And that is what I want to lift up and get my hook under. So you're just going in that little ridge that we've created by doing the back loop only. So now I'm grabbing my yarn and I'm going to go ahead and pull up a loop. But I want to make sure I'm not pulling tightly because I don't want to draw this loop up like that. I want to leave it kind of nice and loose. And if you're having trouble with that, you can always take your thumb and place it over those stitches to keep them from shifting upward. Now I'm going to grab and pull through two, and I'm going to grab and pull through two. And now what I'm going to do is I'm always going to make sure I'm going into my next stitch, and when I'm questioning that, I'm just going to lift my double crochet back, and this stitch right here, that is the stitch the double crochet is covering. So we want to make sure that we never kind of bunch our stitches in. So you just make sure by checking to make sure where that double crochet is. When you cover that stitch, that is not a stitch to work in. The next one is right here. So our repeat is now going to begin. We're going to do 3 back loop only single crochets and then 1 drop down double crochet in the 4th stitch. So this is my first one, and then in my next stitch I'm going to do 3 of these. So in the next one, this is my 2nd back loop only single crochet. Now here's my next stitch, going into that back loop only, doing my 3rd back loop only single crochet, and then here's my 4th stitch. I'm going to identify my 4th, slide my hook down, and I see that little loop that I want to grab up, and I'm going to go ahead and do my drop down double crochet right there in that loop. And that is the end of the repeat. So you're going to go ahead and continue to work in the same exact way all the way down the rest of your row. And we're going to do the repeat together just one more time. So I'm going to identify my very next stitch, and I can move my double crochet back like this and see that it's being covered, that stitch is being covered by that. So this one is my next stitch. So I'm going to do 3 back loop only single crochets into the next 3 stitches. There's number 2. Here's number 3. And then in the 4th stitch right here, I'm going to do my drop down double crochet. So here's my 4th stitch. When I slide my hook down, I see that little loop right there. And that's the loop I want to grab up. I'm going to grab my yarn and gently pull up a nice loose loop. I'm going to grab my yarn and pull through 2. Grab my yarn and pull through 2. And now I'm going to check. There's that stitch. It's covering it up. So the next one, starting my repeat again, I'm going to do the 3 back loop only single crochets. 2 and 3. And then 1 drop down double crochet ends my repeat. And there's that little ridge, and that's exactly what we want to do. The easiest way to pick these up is just to turn your hook upside down basically and lift it on through. And that's going to end our repeat. So you're going to go ahead and pause here and work on down the rest of your row, and we'll meet back up at the very end so we can do that last stitch together. Alright, so here we are at the end of our row. I apologize, just bumped that camera. And we've got one last stitch left to do, so we're going to be going into this very last stitch in our row doing our traditional single crochet. So if you take a look at that, you can tell we've gone under both loops. We're going to grab our yarn and drop a loop, grab our yarn and pull through both loops. And that finishes out our single crochet. So this is what our work is looking like. And now I'm going to go ahead and chain up 2, and I'm going to clip my yarn again. And I'm going to go ahead and pull through, and then I'm going to grab and cinch that down so I can go ahead. That's how I like to bind off. So now I'm going to be going ahead and switching color again. I'm going to go back to my color B, and for this next row, which is row 4, we're going to be starting out with a single crochet in our very first stitch, just like we have been, and then we're going to be jumping right into our repeat. So these rows go by really quickly, and they're very simple repeats. So I'm in underneath both loops, and I'm going to go ahead and add on my slip knot, and now I'm going to draw up that loop. I'm going to grab my yarn and working yarn and my tail and chain 1. Now I'm going to let my tail fall, and I'm going to go right back down into that same exact stitch, and I've done an extra short tail. Try to leave a little bit more than that so you have something to, sew in. I'm going to grab and I'm going to pull up my loop, and I'm going to grab and pull through all those little loops to finish out that single crochet for the start of this row. So now our repeat begins again, and it's just like last row's repeat. We're going to do 3 back loop single crochets in the next 3 stitches, and then 1 drop down double crochet in the 4th. So right here into this very next stitch, I'm doing my back loop single crochet. There's 1. Here is 2. and number 3. And now here in the 4th stitch, I'm going to do my drop down double crochet. Slide down and find that loop. Pick that up. Pull up a nice loose loop and use my thumb to kind of hold that in place. Pull through 2 and pull through 2. And then to make sure I'm going to move into my very next stitch, I'm going to make sure that double crochet is covering that 1 stitch that it takes up. And now I'm going to start my repeat again. I'm going to do 3 back loop only single crochets. 1, 2, going right there in that back loop only. 3. And then I'm going to end my repeat with a drop down double crochet here in the 4th. I'm going to slide down and find that loop. Go ahead and pick it up. Grab my yarn and pull up a nice loose loop. Grab my yarn and pull through 2. Grab my yarn and pull through 2. So you can go ahead and pause here. You're going to continue to work in the same exact way all the way down the rest of your row, doing 3 back loop only single crochets and 1 drop down double crochet all the way to the end of the row. We will meet back up and do that very last stitch together. Alright, so we're here at the end of the row. This is what your work is looking like. And I've done the 3 back loop only single crochets. And my pattern would tell me to do a drop down double crochet. But since this is the very last stitch in the row, we always have to do a traditional single crochet in this stitch. So that's what we're going to do here. Traditional single crochet to end out that row. And then I'm going to chain up 2. I'm going to go ahead and clip my yarn and pull on through. Now I'm going to grab and cinch it down to lock that little knot in place. So now we can go ahead and move on to row 5 of this pattern. We're going to go ahead and have another really easy repeat. We're going to start out with our single crochet here in the very first stitch in the row. So just like we have been, we're going to do that very first single crochet, traditional, working underneath both loops. And we're going to chain 1. We're going to go back down into that same exact stitch, grab and pull up a loop, and grab and pull through 2, just to finish that out. So now we're going to be jumping right into our repeat again. We're going to do, in the very next stitch, we're going to do our first drop down double crochet of this row. So we're going to slide down and grab up that loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And now we're going to do 1 back loop single crochet in the very next stitch. And that ends our repeat. So our repeat for this row starts again with a drop down double crochet. And then we do 1 back loop only single crochet in the very next stitch. And that ends the repeat. So repeat again, drop down double crochet. One back loop single crochet in the very next stitch. So you're going to go ahead and pause here and keep working on down your row in the exact same manner, but this is what you're going to end up with. You've got this drop down double crochet from a few rows ago, and you're framing out beside it, starting to form our pattern. So we're going to go ahead and pause here, and then you will meet back up with me when you're ready to move on to your next row. And please make sure that in that very last stitch of this row, you do your traditional single crochet. I'm not going to meet back up with you at the end of the row because I'm sure you guys have got the hang of it by now. But we'll meet back up to move on to our very next row. Alright, so we're meeting back up and we're joining on for row 6. And I've already joined on my yarn with my traditional single crochet right there in the very first stitch. So now we're going to get started. And we're immediately jumping into our repeat. So we're going to do 1 back loop single crochet in the very next stitch. So I'm going to go right there to that next stitch and do the back loop only single crochet. And then we are going to do 1 drop down double crochet in the very next stitch. So here's my next stitch. I'm going to slide down. There's the little loop we need to grab up. And we're going to go ahead and do a double crochet Finish that out, and that's the end of our repeat. So now for the rest of your row, you're going to do one back loop only single crochet, followed by one drop down double crochet. So slide down, find that loop, and it is just as simple as that. So you'll notice where you're placing your drop downs, you're placing in between these two posts, in between. So each set of posts, you're actually placing a drop down in between. So one back loop only single crochet, followed by one drop down double crochet, and then we'll meet back up when you're ready to move on to row 7. Alright, so we're meeting back up, ready to move on to row 7. And I've already joined on in the very first stitch in the row doing the traditional single crochet. Always remember you're doing a traditional single crochet in the very last stitch at the end of each and every row. And we're going to go ahead and move on. This is another one where we jump immediately into our repeat for this row. So our repeat for this row is going to be one drop down double crochet, and followed by one back loop only single crochet. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So as you can see right here is my very next stitch. So I'm going to slide my hook down and find that little front loop that we left by doing those back loop only single crochets. I'm going to go ahead and do my drop down double crochet. And now in this very next stitch, I'm going to do my back loop only single crochet, and that ends my repeat for this row. So we're going to go ahead and do that repeat again together one more time. We're going to do a back loop only drop down double crochet in the very next stitch. So here's my next stitch. I'm going to slide down and find that loop. And complete out that drop down double crochet. And in the very next stitch, I'm going to do my back loop only single crochet, and that ends my repeat. So this is what your work's going to be looking like. So continue on down your row doing your drop down double crochet, followed by your back loop only single crochet, and we will meet back up when you're ready to move on to row 8. Alright, so we're meeting back up. This is what your work is going to be looking like at this point. So you can completely see your pattern now. So we are meeting up to do row number 8. I have already joined on in the very first stitch here, done my single crochet, traditional single crochet right there in that first stitch. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and do our repeat begins immediately again, and it's another very simple repeat. So we're going to be doing 3 back loop only single crochets, and 1 drop down double crochet will end that repeat. So in this very next stitch, I'm going to go ahead and work my back loop only single crochet. So there's 1. I got to do 3 of these. So here's 2. And here is number 3. And now in the very next stitch, I'm going to do my drop down double crochet. So I'm going to slide my hook down and find that little loop. Lift that up and go ahead and finish out a normal double crochet, and that ends my repeat. So we're going to do that one more time together. We're going to do 3 back loop only single crochet. So there's 1, here's 2, and here is 3, followed by 1 drop down double crochet, and that ends our repeat. So this is what your work is going to look like. You're just working straight across here and then dropping down in between your white posts. So you'll be able to go ahead and move along very easily on this row, doing your 3 back loop only single crochets and 1 drop down double crochet in the 4th stitch. So we will meet back up when you're ready to move on to row 9. Alright, so you're meeting back up with me. We just finished out row 8. And I just wanted to point out this was a row where if I was following my pattern, I would have had a drop down double crochet right here. But because it's the very last stitch in the row, I had to do my traditional single crochet. If you start dropping stitches at the end of your rows and doing like your drop down double crochet or ending it with a back loop, your sides will start getting uneven. And that's what I've just figured out from doing different mosaics like Apache Tears and these projects and everything. So always, always, always single crochet in the very last stitch of your row. Always begin the same way. And you end up with these perfectly straight, even sides. And I know that's what everyone's goal is. Always when they're crocheting something, we want our sides to be nice and straight and even. So if you take a look at that, that's exactly what I have here. Nice, straight, even sides. So we're going to go ahead and get started with row 9. And we're going to be switching, obviously, back to our next color. And we're going to join on in the first stitch, just as we have been with a traditional single crochet. So I'm going to draw up that loop, chain 1, go back down that same exact stitch, and pull up a loop, and then grab my yarn and pull through all the loops I have on my hook. So now we're going to get started. We are going to need to do a back loop only single crochet into the very next stitch. So we're going to go ahead and go into the very next stitch and do our back loop only single crochet. And then in this very next stitch, we're going to need to do a drop down double crochet. So we're going to go ahead and wrap our yarn, find our next stitch, slide down and find that little loop that we need to pick up, and go ahead and grab that up. And then we're going to finish out a normal double crochet nice and loose from this point. Now our repeat's going to begin for this row, and we're going to be doing just like the last row, 3 back loop only single crochets followed by 1 drop down double crochet. So I'm going here into the very next stitch and doing my first back loop only single crochet. Now I'm going to do a second back loop only single crochet and a third. Now I'm going to do my drop down double crochet into the next stitch. Slide down, find that loop, and then finish out a normal double crochet. So if you take a look at your work, you're just placing your drop downs in the center of these little rectangles that we've made. So you're going to continue on down the rest of your row doing the exact same thing, doing 3 back loop only single crochets, 1 drop down double crochet, and then we'll meet back up when you're ready to move on to row 10, which is our last row. Just to point that out, row 10 is going to be the last row. So I'll see you guys in just a moment. Alright, so we are going to do this last row, row 10, and I've already joined on my yarn here, but I want to show you guys what your work's looking like. You could technically stop at this point and move on to another mosaic pattern. You could just do some striping in between several, in between several rows of striping, in between another pattern starting. It's really up to you, but we're going to go ahead and get started with row 10. I've already joined on with my single crochet right here in the front of my row in the very first stitch. So now our repeat is going to begin, and we have another really simple repeat. We're going to be doing a drop down double crochet right here in the very next stitch. So we're going to go ahead and complete that right here in this next stitch. I just split my yarn, so let me do that again. So drop down double crochet followed by 1 back loop only single crochet in the very next stitch. And again, if you're not sure where your next stitch is, you can always pull that double crochet back, and when you lift it back into its spot, you'll see that which stitch it takes up, so you can move on very easily into your very next stitch. And that back loop only single crochet ends our repeat. So let's do that repeat together again. You're going to be doing a back loop or a drop down double crochet into the very next stitch, followed by a back loop only single crochet, and that ends the repeat. So your repeat is drop down double crochet, back loop only single crochet, And I will stop and let you guys take a look at how your work is coming out. So you're just technically, all you're doing is framing around your last drop downs. You're just doing framework right around them. So you're going to continue on in the same exact way all the way down the rest of your row. And that ends this mosaic pattern. You're going to be doing your drop down double crochet, one back loop only single crochet all the way down your row. So just keep on working in that same manner. You'll finish on up and you can move on to another pattern in the series, or you can move on with me. I'll be placing another video up here in the next few days showing how you can move this pattern on up for a series. So I'll be showing you guys how to do this right here, where we are moving up additional rows so that you can use this as a wider pattern repeat in your project. But we'll be bringing that back to you guys in a separate video. So thank you again for watching. As always, please make sure you are subscribed. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching it, and please feel free to leave me a comment down below. Thank you guys again. Have a great one. Bye.